Well, I have to say that it's very encouraging, very heartwarming to see in one room people from all over the world sharing the same goal of protecting public health and improving public health constantly. So that's why I'm really enjoy to welcome you here today. And I know that many of you have been traveling from very far away to come here to understand what we are doing, how we are doing, and why we are doing it. So this interest that you are showing in our activities tells me that we are probably on the right path. If we are not, we will listen from you, some suggestions, some concerns. But certainly it's a stimulus for us to continue to improve and to make even more effort toward the public health with you, and to stimulate innovation, because the science is progressing, but we need still much more to cover all the diseases that are affecting humanities. Of course, during these 2 days, you will be listening and learning about Europe, about how in the European Union we are organizing ourselves, taking this challenge in the public health. I think the European system is unique. I don't say it's the best, but it's a unique by sure, because it's based on one central authority, which is the European Commission, one central agency for the operation, which is the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, and around 50 national competent authorities, covering for 20 languages. So it's quite complex, and covered for 500 million people. I know that in some countries it's not an impressive number, but still 500 million people enjoying one unique way to manage the medicine. With one authorization, we have the same standard at the same time, the same indication for all Europe. I think this is a very quite a high level of efficiency for being such a complex system. And I think that can be inspiring many other systems to have some similar experience. Nothing can be exactly the same. Diversity exists in different jurisdictions and regions, but certainly it's a model that can be reproduced in some aspects. I sincerely hope today, in these 2 days, that we will be drawing some inspiration to cooperate even more among ourselves, among all the regulators. We know that the supply chain is stretched around the world. We know that we have to cooperate more and more to harmonize, to understand, and to facilitate, and to share crucial information that we retain for the benefit of each other. Also, we know that each one of us acts under some local political constriction and pressure, and that's what we share all together. In any part of the world, we have to help each other as regulators to smoothen and to support ourselves for this political pressure that each one of us will experience. And because we pursue exactly the same goal, which is public health. Also, as regard of the non-governmental organization, you have a terrific role to play to convey the message, to build the trust in regulation, and to help us in improving ourselves, to convey the message that we might miss. You feel an important gap, and this cooperation with you and this cooperation among regulators is the only way to really protect public health in a more and more global system and approach. So once again, thank you very much for coming from all over and listening us and helping us in improving. Thank you very much, and I hope a fruitful meeting.
Thank you, Guido. Thank you. I guess you are very busy,
yes,
and we know why. We'll probably discuss that a little bit today. So we will enter into the main topics today. As I said, really feel free to ask questions and interact with the speakers, because that the objective is to make a dialogue with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
So, just a brief word. I don't have a presentation. You will have enough presentation today, so you don't need one more. Just to let you know that the agency has been created in 1995. So we have celebrated our 20th anniversary a couple of years ago. We are established as a networking agency. So most of the experts come from the member state and come to work together in scientific committees. And us, we are a scientific secretariat. We are coordinating the work, we are facilitating the work and complementing the work. So our role is to make sure that public health is protected through the development, approval, and pharmacovigilance of medicines. And our organization reflects this. So we have one division that is working on mostly development, so scientific advice, orphan drugs, pediatrics, everything that happens mostly before the drugs are approved. Then we have one division that does facilitate the approval, but the opinions, the scientific opinion on benefit risk are coming from the committee, scientific committee. And then we have one division which does the pharmacovigilance, risk management plan, and so on. All this will be explained in detail, but just to give you an overview of the structure. We have one division for IT, information management. We have one division for the veterinary medicines. And we have, of course, one division for administration. And then we have a smaller division, but nonetheless important, the International Affairs division. I'm the head of the International Affairs. And we have here a team who has been working very hard to prepare this day. Ricardo, in particular, has been leading, and you probably saw his name in the emails. We have Clément will be today changing the slide for us, and also probably saw his name in the various emails. Sandra at the entrance was giving you the badge, but the whole agency has been supportive of this exercise. Okay, so I think we are going to go into the topic now. And so, again, welcome. And we really want to have an interaction, so you make the most of these days. So
good morning, everyone. My name is Evdokia Korakianiti. I come from Greece. That's why the complicated name. I'm the head of procedure management in the evaluation division. Agnes just presented that. And we are here to present you, to give you a high-level overview of our system in Europe. It's a unique system. We share the work. We rely on each other. We develop together the principles to do our assessment with our committees and our working parties. We are very transparent with each other and with the outside world. So I have a team here that will present to you how the different routes to get a marketing authorization within Europe. What is the role of the EMA and its committees? How do we authorize medicines in the centralized procedure? And then how we regulate medicines once they're authorized, the life cycle. As I mentioned, it's a high-level presentation. And then the rest of the sessions will start explaining different aspects in more detail. There will be a Q&A in the end of the session, so please keep your questions, and we'll discuss them once all the presentations have been provided. So I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Maria Nieto, who will present to you which are the different routes for authorizing a medicine in Europe, because there are many different routes. And then, what is the role of EMA and its committees? Maria, the floor to yours. Thank you.
Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. In this first presentation, I would like to give you an overview on how the EU regulates medicines.
behind the screen. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, so I would like to give you an overview, high-level overview. I will start mentioning who grants marketing authorizations in the EU, and then go through the different routes that are currently available in the EU for the approval of medicines. In my last slide, I will also touch upon the EU, how the EU is organized in terms of pricing and reimbursement. So if we move to my first slide, who grants marketing authorization in the EU? In the EU, all medicines must be authorized before they can be placed on the market and made available to all patients. And this was established back in 1965 when the first EU law on medicines was adopted. This overarching EU legislation sets the data requirements and standards governing the authorization of medicines, which since then are the same across all countries in the EU. There are two main routes for authorizing medicines in the EU. The first route is through national procedures in which marketing authorizations are granted by the corresponding national competent authority. The second route is through the centralized procedures in which marketing authorizations are granted by the EMA in partnership with the European Commission. Importantly, and as I mentioned in my previous slide, even though there are different routes of authorization, there is only one common set of rules based on a single EU pharmaceutical legislation that applies across Europe. In terms of national procedures, there are several possibilities depending on the degree of collaboration established among member states. We have marketing authorizations granted by a single member state, but we also have marketing authorizations that are valid in more than one member state based on an assessment done by a reference member state. Finally, we have the centralized procedure based on a scientific assessment performed by us, by EMA, which leads to a marketing authorization that is valid, to a marketing authorization granted legally by the European Commission and which is valid in all member states across the EU. The choice of the appropriate procedure will depend on, first, the type of product, as the legislation defines a mandatory scope for products to be submitted centrally. However, it will also depend on the authorization history of a particular product, when and whether that product has been authorized in one member state in Europe before. And obviously, the regulatory and marketing strategy of the marketing authorization holders themselves, who can have some flexibility in terms of which national procedure they choose, and there's also an optional scope for the centralized procedure. I will now go a bit more in detail into the different routes that I've mentioned. If we look at the national procedures, the majority of medicines available in the EU are authorized at national level. They were either authorized before the EMA was created in 1995, or they concern products that are not under the scope of the centralized procedure. And for all these medicines, each EU member state has followed its own national procedures and has issued a national marketing authorization valid in their own territories. If we move to the second procedure available via the national authorization route is the mutual recognition procedure, or MRP. Mutual recognition procedures apply when there is already an existing marketing authorization in the EU by one or more member states. This procedure allows member states to rely upon each other's scientific assessment and grant marketing authorizations in their own territories. For example, one member state, Spain, performs a scientific assessment of a particular product and issues a marketing authorization valid in Spain. Then, based on this marketing authorization, the marketing authorization holders, the companies, can apply via MRP to get marketing authorization in other countries, for example, UK and Poland. These member states will rely upon the scientific assessment performed by the reference member state, in this case Spain, the first country that had the marketing authorization, and approve the product in their own territory without a duplication of the same assessment. Finally, the last national procedure available in the EU is the Decentralized Procedure, or DCP. This procedure applies when there are no existing marketing authorizations in the EU. And this procedure allows member states to share the scientific assessment in a way that leads to a simultaneous marketing authorization in more than one member state. For example, one company makes a marketing authorization application in several member states, 3 in this example, via DCP. One of the member states is going to act as the reference member state and perform the scientific assessment, which is then shared with the other member states and leads to a marketing authorization that is valid in the 3 member states at the same time. As we've seen, in addition to the national procedure, the EU regulatory system allows for a centralized procedure which is based on a single marketing authorization application directly to the EMA. The centralized procedure is mandatory for certain scopes, including most innovative medicines and rare diseases. During the centralized procedure, the EMA, via its scientific committees, performs a single assessment and shares its conclusions with all member states. The network pools resources and expertise across the EU in order to reach the highest scientific standards in our scientific recommendations. Once the EMA adopts a positive opinion, then the EU decision-making process starts at the level of the European Commission. The European Commission is the body that issues a legally binding marketing authorization that is valid in all EU member states and members of the European Economic Area. The scientific basis for the EMA recommendations, for all EMA recommendations, are made available to all our stakeholders shortly after the marketing authorization is granted. And it is our commitment as an agency to ensure an open and transparent evaluation process. What is the benefit of the centralized procedure for EU citizens? The first point is that medicines are authorized at the same time across all Europe, in all member states. It allows centralized safety monitoring of medicines, and also it ensures that product information are available in all EU languages at the same time. And finally, I would like to give you an overview on how the EU deals with pricing and reimbursement. Currently, pricing and reimbursement is done via the health technology assessment bodies. These bodies provide recommendations on medicines that can be financed or reimbursed by the healthcare system in a particular EU member state or region. The assessment criteria used by HTA bodies differ between EU member states in accordance with regional and national legislation. Pricing and reimbursement is therefore not done centrally via the EMA. However, the EMA has been working closely with HTA bodies for almost 10 years, and currently we offer consultations in parallel with the European Network for Health Technology Assessment, EUNETA, as of July of this year. The procedure is a single gateway for parallel consultations with EMA, EUNETA, and HTA bodies on their evidence generation plans. A close interaction between regulators, HTA bodies, and other relevant bodies is critical to enable patients access to important new medicines, and the EMA is committed to foster these interactions. I think with this slide, I finish the first presentation.
You want to say what? Thank you.
I mean, so a take-home message for you is that to authorize a medicine, there are many different ways within Europe, national or centralized, centralized gives access simultaneously to all member states, nationally to each member state. Which route to follow depends on the strategy of the company, but also the type of the product, innovative or not. Rocío will explain about that later. But to allow for that, as Maria mentioned, we share the assessment. So we have the example where a member state totally relies on the assessment of another member state to give that authorization. Yeah? And to do that, we focus a lot. We use how we do the assessment, the principles. So we do the assessment having the same standards. And now Maria will explain what is the role of the EMA and its committees, and explain more how we develop these common standards. Okay? Thank you.
Maybe I'll just interspeed a little explanation. We said the majority of products are approved nationally. That is true for the past. All product went through the national route, but since the establishment of the agency, actually most, if not all, new products go through the centralized procedure. What goes through the national procedure are generics and the variation of existing product already approved in the member state. So in practice, in terms of numbers, the member states have far more products than we have. But in terms of type of product, it's completely different, in fact, and all innovative. Industry was initially able to choose, and they actually chose to go through the centralized route, in particular because of its predictability in terms of timelines, authorization in all member states. Building consensus was very important at the beginning, and that was important for industry to see the progress in the approval. So the picture is actually, if you look only at figures, the picture seems, oh, everything goes through the national route. But in fact, if you look at the type of product, some must go through us, so there is no choice. But in fact, even those which were not mandatorily attributed to the agency, industry had chosen to go through the centralized route. So we have a collaboration because it's the same people assessing national product and centralized product. They do it in a different structure, but they're the same people. So there is continuity between the system, but they are actually qualitatively very different.
Thank you. Yeah, so in this next presentation, I would like to give you an overview of the role EMA has in the evaluation and supervision of medicines in the EU. I will go through the main responsibilities of the agency, including the scientific evaluation of medicines, the safety monitoring of medicines, of all medicines that are available on the EU market, the development and access to new medicines, and how we enable timely access to new medicines for the benefit of patients. I will finish with a note on how the EMA strives towards being as open as possible about how we work and how we come to our decisions. So the EMA is one of the decentralized agencies in the EU. It was founded in 1995 and is located in London until March 2019, as far as we know. The legal basis for the creation of the agency and its role are provided in the EU legislation, which sets out the creation of a scientific secretariat responsible for coordinating the existing scientific resources put at its disposal by member states for the evaluation, supervision, and pharmacovigilance of medicinal products. Who do we work for? The EU has developed, as you know, a single market which applies also to medicines. This means that the agency works for over 500 million people living in the EU. We also supervise 27% of the global sales of medicines. In order to do this, we work together with 28 member states, and we publish all our documents and communications in 24 official languages. Who do we work with? EMA works within the European Medicines Regulatory System, which is based on a closely coordinated network of around 50 regulatory authorities, the European Commission, and us, the EMA itself. The EMA is key in the coordination and support of such a unique and extensive network. So what do we do every day? If we focus on what the EMA does, we need to go back to our mission statement and our commitment to protect human and animal health in the EU. We strive to achieve this by facilitating development and access to medicines. We evaluate applications for marketing authorizations. We monitor the safety of medicines across their life cycle, and we provide information on human and veterinary medicines to healthcare professionals and patients. I would like now to focus on how we pursue the evaluation of medicines. The EMA, via its scientific committees, provides independent recommendations on medicines for human and veterinary use based on a comprehensive scientific evaluation of data. Our EU experts participate in the work of EMA as members of its scientific committees, working parties, scientific advisory groups, or as members of the national assessment teams that evaluate medicines. Increasingly, patient and healthcare professionals are also involved in the work of the agency, including the evaluation of medicines. And by working together, member states reduce duplication, share the workload, and ensure an efficient and effective regulation of medicines across the EU. The EMA has 7 scientific committees that carry out its scientific assessment. We have a committee for human medicinal products, a committee for veterinary products, we have a committee for herbal products, and also we have specific committees for the pharmacovigilance risk assessment, the PRAC. We have a committee for advanced therapies, the CAT. We have a pediatric committee, and we have a committee specialized on giving orphan designations for orphan medicinal products. And as I said, we also work closely together with patients and healthcare professionals with dedicated working parties, which were established in 2006, the one for patients, and recently in 2013, the one for healthcare professionals, which help us take their views into the assessment as well. And so obviously, industry organizations are one of our main stakeholders, and we interact actively with them as well. The EMA scientific committees are composed of European experts who are made available by the national competent authorities. As Agnes was mentioning, it's the same pool of experts that do perform the assessment at national level and perform the assessments at EMA. The diversity of the experts involved in our assessment encourages the exchange of knowledge, ideas, and best practice, striving to the highest scientific standards. The EMA maintains a public list with all our EU experts who can be involved in EMA work. Experts can only be involved once the agency has ensured impartiality in our assessments. All our scientific committees are composed by 1 member per member state plus an alternate, and that makes 28 members for the committee. We also have 1 member plus 1 alternate from Norway and Iceland as observers. And there are additional co-opted members that are elected for their specific expertise on scientific or technical matters. And just to mention that the chair and vice chairs are elected for mandates that are for 3-year mandates that are renewable.
And if I may, sorry, most of our committees actually have patients as members, full members, equivalent. They vote exactly like the other member. They contribute to the assessment. It's very important because it's very original. And
yeah. So moving to our role in the safety monitoring of medicines, I would like to highlight that EMA continuously monitors and supervises the safety of medicines that have been authorized in the EU, all medicines, either national or centralized, to ensure that the benefits outweigh the risks. In 2012, a specific pharmacovigilance risk assessment committee, PRAC, was created and is dedicated to the safety of medicines. EMA coordinates the EU pharmacovigilance system and operates services and processes to support pharmacovigilance in the EU. One of the main tools is EudraVigilance, an EU web-based information system that collects, manages, and analyzes reports of suspected side effects of medicines. Public hearings are now also a tool available during the EU safety review of medicines, and they are expected to give EU citizens a voice in the evaluation of the safety of medicines. And actually, we have our first public hearing coming up next week on the 26th of September, and we will be discussing the safety of valproate. With regard to the development and access to medicines, the agency is committed to enabling timely patient access to new medicines and plays a vital role in supporting medicine development for the benefit of patients. The agency prepares scientific guidelines on the requirements for the quality, safety, and efficacy testing of medicines, reflecting the latest thinking on developments in biomedical science. We also provide specific scientific advice through the Scientific Advice Working Party for early stages of development. And finally, EMA supports research and innovation in the pharmaceutical sector and promotes innovation and development of new medicines by European micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. In my last slide, I would like to focus on how the agency ensures and works toward fully transparent operations. EMA strives towards being as open as possible about how it works and how we come to our decisions. We publish clear and impartial information about medicines and their approved uses. This includes transparency of agenda and minutes of committees, public versions of scientific assessment reports, and summaries written in lay language. The public has also the right to request information and documents from us in accordance with its rule on access to documents and on access to information. And importantly, since October 2016, we are publishing clinical data submitted by pharmaceutical companies to support their regulatory applications for human medicines under the centralized procedure. This has been truly a milestone in which the agency has gone above the law, what the law requires to us in terms of transparency. I think, with this, I finish my presentation, and thank you.
Maria, thank you very much for presenting the whole system in such a short time frame. I appreciate this is a lot of information for you, especially those who are not very familiar with our European system. 3 bullet points as take-home message is a very collective decision-making through our committees. Within each committee, we have one representative from each member state. We are very open in our decision-making. We involve patients, healthcare professionals. We are very proud of the first public hearing that will take place next week. And on top of that, we are extremely transparent. We have a whole team working with access to documents, so provide information to the public when they ask for it. I said that we're going to take questions in the end, but knowing that there is a lot of information, I'd rather have a short break now and take any questions you have to ensure that we are all on the same page before we move to the next presentations. So any questions, any clarifications you might want? Yes, please.
Rules of working, you need to use the microphone so everybody can, and also because the meeting is broadcast, so this is relayed outside of the agency, and if you don't use the microphone, you will not be heard. So you press the button speak, and you release it when you're finished speaking, and you see the list.
And please present yourselves.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm Heather Siddiqui. I'm the Science, Technology, and Health Diplomat at the U.S. Embassy in London. My question is about mutual recognition. Do you have mutual recognition with bodies outside of the EU, such as the FDA in the US, or the Canadian Food and Drug Agency, or the Japanese equivalent? Do you recognize them? And the other question is, do you also look at food products like our agency does in the US, genetically modified foods, that sort of thing?
So thank you for the question. Goes already deep into the international affairs business, and some of these topics are going to be expounded during the day. So they on transparency and other things. As regards mutual recognition, let's be clear. We have talked about mutual recognition of marketing authorization, which is one type of national procedures. We do not mutually recognize medicines approval across the world. That's not. What we do mostly is we prepare scientific opinion for use by non-EU countries, generally low and middle income countries and countries which do not have a stringent regulatory authority or do not have the at home the capability to assess complex innovative products. But that doesn't mean we are not talking to our friends and partners across the Atlantic or across the Pacific. So we do have a number of exchanges, and again, they are going to be presented with our counterparts in FDA, Canada, Japan, and Australia as the main, the most active interactions. But we have interaction, as you know, many of you have already had interaction with us, and we are also working on capacity building. But in terms of approval of medicine, there is no such thing as a mutual recognition because our legislation and the competence is not there to approve something that has been assessed, maybe in the future. And also just a reminder that we are not the one formally approving the medicine. We are just providing all the scientific assessment, and the approval is given by the European Commission. I have to be careful because we have one representative in the room, Georgios Balkamos, who is here, so I have to watch what I say. Thank you.
Perhaps you asked about food as well,
Food,
and perhaps we can expand that. Yes, it's not in the remit of EMA. However, we collaborate with EFSA, particularly in the role in the area of excipients. Yes. So when there are excipients that may be used in food, but also as in medicinal products, there is a collaboration between the committees. So the agency is a very open agency, and although certain areas are not direct in its remit, as you know, there might be overlaps, and in those areas, we interact. So EFSA is the equivalent of EMA for food. And in the area of excipients, for example, the use of aspartame, the use of lactose, we work together. Yep.
Also an opportunity to remind you that we only do with what we call medicines, which covers drugs, biologicals, and vaccines, but we don't, for human and veterinary use, but we don't do devices, we don't do food, we don't do tobacco, we don't do certain things that maybe your agencies are irresponsible for. We also don't do the approval of clinical trial, but that will be explained again later on during the day. So it's a bit of a complex puzzle within the European Union on responsibility. Sometimes it's the member state, sometimes it's the European agency and the Commission, sometimes it's a little bit of both, and that's the pleasure of working in Europe.
And we help industry. We help industry and applicants to understand this borderline. So even with devices, we have a team working on borderline products, trying to explain when something can be a device and what something should be regarded under this legal framework as a medicinal product. So we are here not only to say this is what we do or what we don't do, but in many, many cases, we help navigate the borderline. Yes, please, your question.
Yes, I'm Andreas Balzig. I'm head of the legal sector of Swissmedic, Swiss Therapeutic Agency. I would have a question to the last slide of Maria Nieto regarding the publication of clinical data. If I'm correct, EMA was taken to the European Court on this issue, and if I'm correct, what's the state of play there?
We have a special presentation on this topic later tomorrow. So if you don't mind, all this will be revealed at the time.
Thank you very much.
The suspense going on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
My name is Zuma. I'm from the Zambia Medicine Regulatory Authority. I just want to understand a bit on the differences between committees, working parties, and scientific groups. What are their works and what are their boundaries?
A committee is anticipated in the regulatory framework, in the law. Like the Committee for Human Medicines, CHMP is the one that is responsible to give a scientific opinion on the evaluation, is defined in the law. A working party, simply speaking, lay language is, as Maria mentioned, each committee has a representative from each member state. Yeah? But can we expect that these people know everything about everything? No. So they are supported by specialized working parties. For example, the Quality Working Party, the Safety Working Party. So when there is a need for specialized input to develop our guidelines, to develop our concept papers, then we go to experts. Yeah? In that particular area, for advanced therapies, for example, or the different cell therapies, etc. If you look at the scientific field, we need to have this pocket of expertise. And on top of that, even within an area, you need to have even more specialized expertise in some cases. So, for example, you need to have a question to a specialized cardiologist. That's what we have, our so-called scientific advisory groups that give advice to committees. So what you see here is the committees are responsible for the decision-making. However, they reach out to working parties or advisory groups as needed to give specialized expertise. Have I explained it simply?
Again, this will come back through various presentations. You will see the role of certain working parties, like the Scientific Advice Working Party, which is nearly a committee, in fact. But the difference between committees and working party as the main thing, the committee makes the final opinion, scientific opinion. The working parties are preparing the work for the committee. That's sort of simple summary of the roles.
Hi, good morning. My name is Hideyuki Kondo, Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Agency from Japan. You emphasize that the committees have the patients as members. My question is that how do you find or select good or appropriate patient representative into these committees?
This is a very interesting question. Yeah, we came from 20 years ago when we started working with patients. Mostly doctors said, yeah, they are nice. It's nice to work with patients, but they won't understand science. Leave it to us. And then we realized actually that they knew the disease much better than the doctors very often, and that they were actually very important. And they are also keeping us safeguarding the objective of what we do, public health. So they are very important. To recruit them, we generally, the European Commission launches an expression of interest to patient organization. They are certainly better organized, for example, in rare disease, where we have a long-standing, like in the US, long-standing tradition of small organization joining forces on rare diseases. And EURORDIS has been the equivalent of NORD in the US. So expression of interest from the Commission. Then they submit their application, and the Commission makes the appointment among the patient organization who are applying, and there they are appointed to our committees through this route. But to make sure that we have a committee that is devoid of conflict of interest, and patients can have conflict of interest, we know that certain patient organizations were financed completely by industry, especially at the beginning for registries of Gaucher disease, and so they were only financed by industry. So we have established a framework to work with patient organizations. They have to be transparent on their funding. They have to explain how they are working with doing what, and of course, all our committee members have to fill in a public declaration of interest. So we also analyze the individuals, but we also work with patient organization under our patient organization framework.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Farai. I'm from the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe. So maybe just on the mutual recognition and the decentralized procedure. I think you mentioned that on the mutual recognition there will be another country which has already done the assessment, and another country needs to get access to what the other country has done. So what do they get? Do they get an assessment report, or does the country which already did the assessment prepare some form of scientific opinion? Or
Although I have to say I'm not familiar with all the details of the mutual recognition procedure, what happens is the company submits the dossier and the assessment reports, that they have received from the member state that has done the initial assessment. And then that member state will authorize it. The exact details of exactly what they receive, perhaps Agnes is more familiar. Agnes?
Because I used to work in the French agency, I remember I participated in mutual recognition. So the principle is the application is submitted to everybody. So every member state who is intended to give an approval at the end receive the application. One member state does the work of assessment and then share the assessment report within a certain time frame with the other member state. They have a look at the assessment report done by the first member state, the reference member state, and they say whether they agree. They can disagree only for a reason of a major objection to public health. So if they really find something that is impossible for them to accept, they have the right to say no. But then there will be an arbitration procedure, because one member state has considered that the benefit risk was positive, and then another member state considered the benefit risk is not positive, major objection for reasons of public health. So that is then there is a two-step arbitration procedure if they disagree. If they agree, of course, the product is authorized just authorized. There is no reassessment. But if they disagree, then the first step is a discussion in the what we call CMDH, the coordination committee, which is made of national competent authorities assessors, and they look at why they disagree and try to solve the issue. And if it doesn't work, they cannot resolve the issue, it goes to the committee here for approval, which will make by consensus the work and decide whether the objection was sustainable or on the contrary, there is no reason to object and the product is approved. And in that case, the product can be approved everywhere in Europe because the committee had the final word on the science, and that is valid for the rest of Europe. So they cannot be objected anymore. That's the view of Europe as one organization. I hope this is clear. It's always a bit complicated, but we're happy to provide more explanation on the time if you want.
And Elena, in the end, in our last presentation, this session, will discuss a bit more about these arbitration procedures, referrals we call them. So we say collective decision making, but what happens when member states disagree? Elena will talk about it in the end. Any other question before we move on? Yes, thank you.
I'm Vicky. I'm Misu from Taiwan Center of Drug Evaluation, and my question is for the centralized procedure. Will the pharmaceutical company know their drug will be evaluated by which first member state, or the first member state will be confidential for the sponsor?
That's your presentation.
That's what we're going to be covering in my presentation.
Okay,
Very good.
Thank you.
So thank you for your question. Unless there is another burning question, we can move on to our next presentation. Okay, last question.
Sorry, maybe just one more. I think we tend to encounter such situations where a company has submitted a product to a country, maybe 5 years ago, then they want to submit to another country, 2017, and they want us to refer to the report of the other country, for example. Do you have situations like that in Europe, and how do you handle such?
That's the mutual recognition procedure. But normally, as Agnes explained in the beginning, at start, at the time of the initial evaluation, when they go to the first country, you said they go to one country in 2012, and then after 5 years, they go to another. In 2012, they will say that I want to go to Greece, Italy, and Spain. So they have to say it from the start. So these member states engage in the actual assessment. This is how we build our system.
Just to say,
Otherwise, they can go nationally. Sorry, Agnes. Otherwise, they can go only to Greece with a full package, and then they can go to Spain later on with a full package. Okay, Agnes?
we do not now allow parallel assessment. They cannot approve once in the in Spain, and then 5 years later to go to Germany on their own, and then to go to another country. It will because they're already an approval. They will have to follow the mutual recognition procedure, because we don't want to continue approving product with different routes.
Thank you very much for your questions, but for timekeeping, we need to go on. So Rothio will give us an overview of the European Market Authorization. Yeah.
So thank you. Good morning. My name is Rothio Gonzalo, and I work as a procedure manager here at the agency. So I mainly deal with centralized procedure. The aim of my presentation is to introduce to you a couple of basic concepts on the marketing authorization in Europe, and then go straight to explain how it works, the centralized procedure, which, as we mentioned before, is the way of obtaining one single marketing authorization valid for the whole of Europe. So let's start with the basic principles, and I have to apologize to start with legislation. But it's important you know the legal framework we are talking about here. So we have the European directive, which talks about the main aspects of the regulations of drugs in the European Union. This directive is translated into national law by each member state. So each member state will have specificities in their own law, but take the main aspects from the directive. And then we have the regulation, which sets out or talks about the centralized procedure and is valid across Europe. It doesn't need to be translated into national legislation. Yeah.
Sorry to intervene in the middle, but I think you will hear a lot about these two types of laws in Europe, a directive and a regulation. Directive is a sort of framework which has to be incorporated in national law, but they cannot go beyond the framework which is set at European level. Whereas the regulation is a directly implementable law. There is no possibility to change a single comma or word in that. So they are in a hierarchy of law, the regulation is above and applies across the board. The directive is more flexible and recognizes certain flexibility, but not on the principle. So there is no parallel systems through the directive, but there is a framework. Sorry for that.
Yeah, for sure. So, choice of authorization route. There are, as we said, several ways of getting a marketing authorization in Europe. We have the centralized procedure and we have the nationally based procedures. So there are certain products that need to go to the centralized procedure. These are basically products that are innovative. As Agnes said before, most of the products currently are going to the centralized procedure. We cover certain therapeutic areas in which the company that has a product on that area needs to go to the EMA to get the centrally authorized procedure, the centrally authorized medicinal product. There are other products for which the company can choose to go to the centralized procedure or can go to the nationally based procedures. And these are, in general, also innovative products from other therapeutic areas that are not covered for the centralized procedure, and are also generic products, for example, from centrally authorized procedures. And there are, finally, some other products that are outside the centralized procedure. They cannot come with a product not included in the mandatory scope to the EMA to get an approval. Basically, if you're interested, there are the areas for which are mandatory the use for centralized procedure are recombinant DNA technology products, controlled gene expression products, orphan medicines, new active substances for AIDS, cancer, neurodegenerative disorders, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, viral diseases, or advanced therapy products. These are the products that have to come compulsory through the centralized procedure. So as you can see, most of the innovative new products come to us. So what are the requirements for the marketing authorization in terms of data presented? We use the common technical document format, and the requirements vary depending on the legal basis of the application. Basically, it's not the same for a generic than for innovative products. There are certain areas that can be more or less completed, but the format is always the same. We use the CTD, and currently, actually, we use the electronic CTD. It's mandatory for the centralized procedure to submit it in electronic version. There is a roadmap of implementation of the electronic way in the national for the nationally based procedures. But yes, so basically, the CTD, as you know, is a modular structure. We have in it included detailed quality, clinical and non-clinical data, as well as administrative data on the pharmacovigilance system and the product information. So specifically on the centralized procedure, as we said, the way of obtaining a marketing authorization valid throughout Europe, we have to say that at the core of the system is the evaluation of the benefit-risk balance for the product. Our system works in a collaborative, connected, and transparent way. And let me explain that. The evaluation starts with, as we said, with an individual assessment done by two rapporteurs, two separate rapporteurs or two teams from the same committee. That will be the rapporteur and the co-rapporteur, and they will independently take the dossier. Well, all the committee will receive the dossier. There will be appointment of two rapporteurs, rapporteur and co-rapporteur, which will be equally, let's say, equally responsible for the full assessment, and they independently will do this assessment. This assessment will be shared within the whole committee, and there will be comments that will be received. Every member of the committee will need to provide comments if they have to, whether they agree or they don't. Sorry, I forgot to mention. After the two rapporteur and co-rapporteur do their independent assessment, we have a third member of the committee, a third rapporteur that will do a peer review. Will go through the assessments and will criticize or punctualize which parts. So we have three people having an in-depth look at the dossier. Then we have the common review via these three rapporteurs and the comments received. We are connected with an extensive network of experts, which we, as we said before, we have scientific advisory groups, we have working parties that the committees are contacting depending on whether the specificity of the matter, the committee might not have the full expertise on each topic, and they contact them in the evaluation process on a regular way to get their expertise input. And finally, the process is transparent, both, I would say, in both layers, both internally. As we said, all the assessment reports are shared across the committee. All comments are taken on board, discussed, and they are shared across the network of experts if it's needed. And then we have also a layer of transparency externally. As we published the assessment report at the end of the process, once it's approved, we keep punctually informed the public as well on what is going to be discussed in the different committees as we publish the agendas and the minutes. And then we publish the full assessment report. Also, if there are divergent positions, for example, in the committee, when taking an opinion, we also make public these divergent positions. So we get the committee's final view and the part of the committee that didn't agree and why, it's all made available at a later stage. With regards to the pre-submission, what happens before the company submits a marketing authorization in the centralized procedure? So in this diagram, you can see a number of interactions, being the end of the arrow at the right-hand side, the point of submission. So from the early development phases for a product, the company can contact the EMA in forms such as the Innovation Task Force. They contact us on pediatric requirements. They contact us with SME questions. Importantly, they contact us for scientific advice. Scientific advice will be discussed in depth in another presentation, but I will single out as an important phase in the pre-submission as, although it's not mandatory, it really helps the company to know whether their development plan is going on the right direction, is complying with the guidelines, and it's going on the right direction to get a smooth marketing authorization process. And then closer to the date of submission, we have more I would say hands-on meetings in where we discuss more the content of the dossier, how the company is compiling the document, which sort of things they should put in one way or the other. So we do have these interactions, which we call pre-submission meetings, and we hope they're helpful for the companies. Let's move on to the evaluation. So once the application comes to the EMA, as you know, it comes in the ECTD format, and it arrives at the same time to all the committee members as well as to the agency. We start with the assessment process. Above in this diagram, you can see the days from day 1 to day 277, which is roughly what takes to obtain a marketing authorization in Europe. The active time of scientific evaluation is 210 days. And then we have the commission decision, the latest phase, which I will talk about in a minute. So we validate the application, and the rapporteurs start their scientific assessment, which is divided into rounds or cycles of assessment. Basically, they receive the information, they assess it, they share it for comments, they discuss it in the committee, and they come out with a list of questions or a definite opinion. But several rounds of this circle of assessment is repeated throughout. It's always the same. Assessment, comments, discussion, and decision on the next step. So basically, most of the time, the company receives between 2, sometimes 3 rounds of questions that need to be responded in a certain time frame, and then the next round starts again. As we said before, the system works in a collaborative way, as the assessment is done by several teams, we said, in a connected way, we share it, and in a transparent way that we said before. We share the reports within the network, and then we publish them after the approval is finished. With regards to the CHMP opinion, so obviously the CHMP assessment and opinion is based on scientific criteria. The committee looks in depth at the quality, safety, and efficacy data presented by the company. And the main, as we said, is to establish whether the risk-benefit is positive for a given product. At the end of the process of assessment, the CHMP will adopt their opinion by voting, and this voting can result in a consensus, which everybody would agree on a positive opinion for a certain product, or in a majority vote. If we get a majority vote, as I said before, we will publish the divergent views. So when half plus 1 of the committee members are in agreement, there will be a positive opinion. So what types of marketing authorization can a product be granted? There are several types, and it depends basically on the amount of evidence provided by the company. What we call normal or full marketing authorization is granted when the data presented provides a high level of evidence and complies with all the requirements in terms of data. We grant a conditional marketing authorization for products for which the data available is less than what it would be required, but these are products that address an unmet medical need, and we would like to see them in the market as soon as possible. So the company is asked to perform certain studies to complement this evidence that is missing, and we would expect that within a short time frame, maybe a couple of years, the company has gathered this information and sent to us, but the product can be already in the market in the meantime. And finally, we grant marketing authorization in exceptional circumstances when a company proves that really it is not possible to obtain the full comprehensive information that we are expecting for every product, often because of the rarity of the disease. This is very normal for orphan products. And then they are subject to certain conditions that they need to keep on studying. I mean, we don't expect to receive a full package anytime, most likely, but we keep on receiving every year data, particularly on the safety of the product, that reassures that that the product can continue to be used. Finally, post-opinion, once the CHMP has issued their scientific opinion, this is sent to the European Commission in Brussels, and they will grant the marketing authorization based on the scientific assessment from the committee. They do have another committee called the Standing Committee, which has a final look at the assessment and at the opinion, and then they grant the marketing authorization, which is valid throughout Europe. So once the company has received the Commission decision, as it is called, what they issue at the end of the process, the product can be marketed all over Europe. So to finalize, perhaps I would give three main messages to take home from my presentation. What make our system be successful, I would say, is the common review of the data that is done as we described by two rapporteurs, by a different one doing peer review, by comments from all, by using the network, the connection of expertise that we gather as we need, and the transparent way we publish all the assessment reports at the end. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you very much, Rocio.
So thank you very much, Rocio, for presenting the whole process. And I could only just highlight again, repeat the main messages that Rocio gave is, we work together, we appoint rapporteurs to do the primary assessment, but there is always an overview from the rest of the member states. We rely on each other, but we do it on the basis of agreed principles that are prepared by our working parties. So nobody does their assessment on their own way, no? And then there are many rounds and many possibilities for all member states to express their opinions. And of course, we publish in a very transparent way. Agnes, do you have any?
Yeah, just also to highlight, maybe behind the scene, you can imagine that the flow of information is quite important. We receive information, heavy, big dossier, even if it's electronic, it's big data, from companies. Then we exchange it with the member state. We send assessment report. We receive comments, send list of questions. We publish summary of what's happening for the public. But at the end, our assessment is made public under the form of what you've certainly seen as the European Public Assessment Report, which was also a landmark in the regulatory world by showing clearly what were the reasons for the positive benefit risk. Now we also publish that for negative benefit risk. So we're trying to associate the public with our work, and we have reversed, you will see, that's why we talk a lot about transparency, because we have reversed a sort of tradition of regulators to work behind closed doors. For good reason of confidentiality, commercially sensitive information, we were hiding information that was important for public health purpose. And we have tried to reverse this. We respect trade secrets, but we are not respecting secrecy when it comes to safety, when it comes to evidence of efficacy. And once a product on the market, people should know why it is on the market. We should justify clearly to everybody. So this is a very different set of mind to work with the public as also checking on us and trusting us, because they can see and understand why we came to a certain conclusion. They may not agree. Even in our committee, sometimes all the committee members don't agree. But at the end, we say, okay, the majority agrees to go in that direction. There is a minority who disagree, and that minority, we publish why they disagree. So we're also trying to respect the fact that the democratic approach to vote is not, maybe in science, not so logical.
If you have questions, and I would expect you have questions, please keep note of them, and I will take them in the end. And I would like to give the floor to Elena Matos, who will tell us what's happened to the product once it's authorized, and how do we regulate it when it enters its life cycle. Elena, the floor to you. Thank you.
Oh, I can use this. Okay. Yeah. So good morning. I will now. Oh, sorry. Maybe the opposite. So I will now address the life cycle of the product. So the work doesn't end when the product has a license and goes out into the world. As we mentioned, it's 5 million people. So we do leave the area of the control setting of the clinical trials and the studies very well conducted to show us and to bring the evidence that we need for the committees to see in terms of quality, safety, and efficacy. And then once the product is approved, so we will collect a huge amount of data that has not been available during the pre-authorization phase. So a whole new cycle life of the product starts, and we do have now two parts, we could say. One is the requirements by the EU legislation, which obviously include as well the safety, collecting safety information on the patients. So we do have things which are set by the legislation, so rules that have to be followed, procedures that have to be submitted, and we have the other, what we've called in my presentation of other post-authorization activities, which is when we have a safety issue which is completely unforeseen. How does the system react to that? How do we work together to deal with that safety issue, which is has an impact on the whole EU population and beyond? So I will address that as well. So let's start with basically the EU legislation requires the marketing authorization holder, so the company that holds the license of the product, to ensure that the scientific and technical progress, it's keep up to date in that license. So it's not because the product now has a license that there's no other commitments that have to be shown throughout its life cycle. Obviously, this is in terms of the quality, safety, and efficacy, always bearing in mind a constant positive benefit risk of the product throughout its life cycle. So this is the post-authorization activities that we have like a toolbox in the system to operate whenever we have to. So I will go into details in each of them. So we start with the renewal. So so we have now a license. As Rusi, you mentioned, we have different types of marketing authorizations, and obviously depending on the high level of evidence that was provided in the dossier and the type of marketing authorization that was granted, the validity of that license will be different. So we have for the normal of the full marketing authorization, as Rocio said, the ones that show a very high level of evidence and robustness of the data, the validity of the market authorization is of 5 years. So meaning that within 5 years' time, we will receive an application that will allow us to reevaluate the benefit risk of the product. The outcome of that procedure will be, okay, we don't have any more concerns, and the license could be on the market from now on with an unlimited validity, because all the tools that we have there to monitor the product will be enough. Or then that might be concerns, mainly on the pharmacovigilance safety level, that will say we would like to see another 5-year renewal. So we have then for conditional marketing authorizations, yearly renewals, and as well for exceptional circumstances. As Rocio mentioned, if it's a conditional, the level of evidence might be getting to a stage where we can say, okay, we can switch now to a normal marketing authorization of a 5-year validity from now on. That does not happen with exceptional circumstances. As Rocio say, we don't expect to see a full package, because this is for those conditions of rare disease. Perhaps the number of patients will never be enough to have that level of evidence that we need to go through a normal. So this is the renewal of the marketing authorization that is set by the legislation. Then we have, so throughout the life cycle of the product, there will be obviously amendments, as I mentioned at the beginning, to maintain the progress, the scientific and technical progress of the marketing authorization as we go along. As the guidelines come, there's new requirements, there's new things that, changes in the manufacturing process of the product as it goes along. And the variation system, in fact, is based on the risk level approach, also the assessment of those variations. So if we have, for example, a type 2 variation that justifies the new, so the data that company collected is to extend the indication to a new patient population. That obviously is considered a major type 2 variation with a full assessment of the information, and it's considered a major variation. A new pharmaceutical form, for example, so a line extension will require all the team, the rapporteurs, to assess in a similar way of the initial in some situations. There's other amendments that will be required that will be just simple notifications, so the company can implement them and then they notify us of those changes. So those are called administrative changes, which are mainly dealt by the agency. So we have then the periodic safety update reports. So this is set as well at periodic periods where we want to see the safety, we want to receive the information on the safety of the products as soon as they go out in the market. So the first will be the 6 months, then we pass through 1 year, and we have cycles of 3 years and so on. These periodic safety update reports that's where we collect information from adverse drug reactions of the products. So they can be reported to what we call the spontaneous reports, which in our system is through healthcare professionals. We know in other systems we also collect information from the patients as well directly. So we do have information from spontaneous reporting. We have as well from the studies that the companies have ongoing, the post-authorization studies that they have ongoing. The PSURs provide an opportunity for the company to, with a critical view, to see what's the impact of this safety data in the risk-benefit of the product. So as an outcome of the assessment of these periodic safety update reports, it can be a suspension of the marketing authorization. Is, for example, if we have new safety findings that in fact put in question the benefit risk that was previously seen. So it's a very active tool and very periodically that we have to see this information. As well, although it's set in the legislation, the period of time that the companies have to submit to us those reports, they can be asked by an authority at any time in point for the companies to submit to us this information. So this is a very important tool for us to periodically review the benefit risk evaluation of the products. together with the knowledge of the safety, of the knowledge of the product, not only safety anymore, we have the risk management plan. So we can have potential identified risks, which then the companies can propose a plan on how to manage those risks by proposing, for example, educational materials, so what we call the risk minimization measures, so known risk or potential ones. So this is as well a document, very comprehensive one, that can be submitted, and we closely monitor how the measures are being implemented or not. Because the other part of the risk management plan is not only the measures that are proposed to manage the known or potential risks, but it also allows us to see the effectiveness of those risk minimization measures. Another tool we have is the post-authorization safety studies or post-authorization efficacy studies. These can be identified at the initial assessment of the dossier. So we can see the committees might identify there's a specific need to do a study on a specific safety issue. So that will be reflected in the risk management plan. In those situations, the protocol is agreed by the risk assessment committee. So the protocol is agreed, and the study will then be performed, results of the study as well provided to us in an integrated way. And obviously then we will see if the studies addressed the concern that was there initially or not. So we would collect, and we will further characterize the profile of the product as we know it at the beginning. In the same way, we have post-authorization efficacy studies, and obviously this will be conditions of the marketing authorizations which are legally binding. The assessment of those protocols, they will be, and the final results, they are submitted to the MEA through a post-authorization measures, what we call PAMs, and that's how we do the assessment. The assessment of all these procedures I've been mentioning is in a way similar to the initial. So we have one rapporteur which is taking the lead on the assessment. The dossier is always shared by everyone, which can provide comments, discussion at the committees, the same situation if we need a vote. So I would not go in details, but if you have any concerns on and want to know more how the assessment is done, I can address that. As well, timeline specifically for all these procedures, and they are, as depend on the risk of the assessment, they are also different. So now it takes me to the other post-authorization activities that we have. So we have something that's called a sunset clause. So if you ever seen somewhere mentioned the sunset clause, this means that as soon as the product has a license, a centrally authorized product has a license, can be valid in the 28 member states, it needs to go on the market effectively. So if within 3 years from the time where the marketing authorization is granted, if the product is not marketed in any of the 28 member states, then the sunset clause applies. So basically, they lose the license. So we are informed by the companies every time that the product goes on a specific member state market. We have this information in-house. So there's other tools that we can use. One of them is referrals, and I will address them more specifically. We'll link with some of the things that were mentioned before. We have as well safety, urgent safety restrictions, which is, a safety concern that we need really to restrict the product immediately on a specific patient population, that we can do that in 24 hours, obviously followed up by the regulatory procedures that we will need then to have those amendments due in the license, and the suspension or withdrawals of the marketing authorization. So suspensions, if they are due to safety concerns, then they will trigger referrals that I will address just after this. And withdrawal of the marketing authorization can be something that can be started by the company, so they can decide to withdraw a product from the market, not for safety reasons, because if it's for safety reasons, then it will trigger automatically a referral. So basically referrals, and this is just to give you an idea. So Referrals are triggered for different situations, but basically is when we have issues on quality, safety, or efficacy issues. And then we have an EU connected review and assessment of that issue, obviously with aim on the impact of the issue on the benefit risk of the product, always aiming to protect public health. And in the end, the outcome is an harmonized outcome across the EU. So we have mainly three types of referrals, we could say, three big pillars of referrals. One is the urgent safety restrictions. It's the urgent union procedures. It's called Article 107s. Yes. Yeah, Article 107. We don't have currently another name for that, but if you will find information of all procedures we have had, and this is they are automatically triggered. So if we have if a member state, any member state, and this is not only restricted to centrally authorized products, so it's any product approved in the EU, if we have one member state saying, I will suspend this product due to safety concerns, this automatically triggers an European procedure, which is the Article 107I. The same with the revocations, and the same with a renewal of a product that a member state considers that they cannot renew it for safety issues, even though it's national MRP or DCP. This is something which is dealt at the European level. So this is what we call Article 107Is, urgent union procedures. Then we have the Article 31s, 20s, and I'm not going into, I can go in detail of what is each of them, but just to give you a general idea. So that's when we have concerns. So any kind of concern which doesn't fit of an Article 107I, it's basically roughly an Article 31. And again, it's not only specifically for centrally authorized products, but for all products in Europe. And again, we have an issue that might not immediately require an urgent action at the 107 of suspension straight away. So we will trigger an European review. And we will look into the impact of that issue in the benefit risk of the product. And then the third one is what Agnes addressed earlier today, is doing the MRP procedure. For example, we have one product which is already approved in a member state, is going MRP with another one which raises major objections due to public health concerns. So that's when we start the Article 29s with the CMDH looking at that first, and then see if they can get an harmonized view. If not, it goes to the CHMP, to the Human Medicines Committee. So this is the main three pillars of the referrals, which again aims an harmonized outcome across the EU on several quality, safety, or efficacy issues. And this concludes my presentation on the main tools we have post-authorization. I'm happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Elena, very much. So as you can see, a risk-based approach in post-authorization. So the floor is open for questions for both the initial market authorization and the life cycle. Yes, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Hassan. I'm from the Saudi Food and Drug Authority. I'll start with Helena, please. I have two questions. The first one is the conditional approval. Can this be done on the quality basis, or usually it is only for the safety and efficacy issues of the submission?
It is on safety and efficacy. I don't think we can approve a product that is not done in a good quality way and then expect to get it developed as better. So it's on the safety and efficacy, mainly on the efficacy, I would say.
And there is another session, in the next session, session 2, there is a specific presentation on conditional, on the different types of marketing authorization. So we are just giving you a flavor now, and then you get more detail in session 2, in the next session.
Okay, the second question is with the withdrawal or the sunset clause. Can a company ask EMA to withdraw a product although it is effective in the market for marketing issues? And will EMA accept that?
I mean, usually what we do, we need the confirmation from the company that it's not due to safety issues. And also, they would say what is the time that they think the product will be withdrawn. Yeah, effective.
The answer is yes, a company can request withdrawal from the market and stop marketing. That they're right, they are the owner of the product. They can discontinue. We will have a concern with shortages in that case. We already have shortages because the effective marketing may not be on all member states, and we know that the smaller member states may not see as many, even centrally approved. They are approved, but they are not put on the market effectively. So we would be concerned about shortages. But in principle, a company can withdraw and stop marketing if they decide to do so. But they will have to inform us. And as Elena said, we will make sure that there is no hidden safety issue that would be try to go unnoticed. That would be the question.
How will EMA handle the shortage of these medication?
That's another big issue. I think we will discuss it tomorrow with inspection because it's mostly managed by us through this way. But we have no power on shortages. That's a big issue. The Commission has started working on shortages. We have a registry, and company must notify us when they withdraw a product. So we try to assess whether there will be an effect, if there are no alternatives, if the other products are not well tolerated, and we know that. So we will analyze the situation. What we're trying to do is to try to work ahead of the shortage and to anticipate any risk of shortages, in particular when there is a quality defect or another issue coming to us. We are trying to see, and that's also one discussion when there is a referral. When we take the decision to suspend or to withdraw the product, we are looking at the consequences and the balance of the benefit and risk for some patients, the risk for others, and the shortages risk. But it's not a simple equation because if the company does not produce we have no ways of forcing a company to produce a medicine.
Okay. My last question is the role of the rapporteur and co-rapporteur. As Rocio mentioned, that the application is assessed by a rapporteur and a co-rapporteur who represent the EMA or represent each member state.
So,
Interesting question.
in the committee, each committee member that they become rapporteur for certain products. So each committee member represent actually themselves, not their member states. So that's first a conceptual concept to have in mind. Once the committee appoints a rapporteur and a co-rapporteur, they will keep on representing themselves as scientific individuals as part of the committee, and they will perform the assessment in-house with the resources of their member state agency. So they will get assessors, a team, helping them in their own member state to perform the assessment. Yeah.
This is a very tricky question, in fact, because our legislation says the committee member should not take instruction from the member state. They should be a scientist, and they should behave as a scientist and work on benefit risk for science, because we're not even discussing at that time the authorization, we're discussing a scientific opinion. But in fact, as Rocio said, a rapporteur works with a team from home. And of course, they are influenced by what is the role of the agency, the position on the agency of a product. It's not a political decision in any case. It's not an economical decision, because we don't look at the price or the cost. But of course, there is an influence of the member state. But in the committee, they vote and they are members. And although they come each from one particular member state, they vote as member, not as representative of a member state.
Yes.
Yes, Andreas Balsig, Swiss Medic. I'd have two questions regarding Rocio Gonzalo's presentation. First, until which phase can an applicant retire its submission? Which phase of the procedure? Is it stops it at a phase of EMA, or goes it further to the commissional phase?
So the applicant can withdraw their application, which would be expected in case of a negative opinion, I would say, before the reach of that negative CHMP opinion. Once the CHMP opinion has been transferred to the European Commission, the applicant can still withdraw it up to the day that the Commission issues the marketing authorization. So basically, until before the marketing authorization has been issued and published by the Commission, the marketing authorization holder can, or the applicant can withdraw their application. But we will make it public anyway. We will publish in any case if that there was a negative opinion and that the applicant has withdrawn the opinion, and the assessment report on this opinion will be published in any case.
Technically, they can withdraw, but they cannot change our views. So by withdrawing, they cannot hide or change our views. So we will publish the assessment report up to the time of the procedure. Of course, it has to have a meaning. If there is no assessment report, we will just say withdrawn, but we will not explain. But if there is an assessment that has already been made, we will explain where we were and where were our preliminary conclusions. So it cannot hide.
That's very interesting. Thank you. The second question regards the labeling phase, or the labeling of the product. In which phase do you assess the labeling of the product? Or when does it start?
It starts at the very beginning because with the marketing application, the company needs to submit a draft product information. So they already submit a draft. The product information is discussed at every single round of assessment. The rapporteurs make comments on it, and we transfer it as questions to the applicant. So in every single round of assessment, it is discussed from the very beginning, and then it is approved, or it is included as part of the final opinion. So the final CHMP opinion will contain a final agreed product information.
Be here to highlight the difference with the US FDA, where the marketing authorization holder license product own the information, and they can be challenged on misbranding if they decide to put things. But we decide on the text, and we approve the text, and it's part of the decision made by the Commission. So they are not at will to change the wording or to add something, or to that is a part of the formal decision, and translated, of course.
And any change to the product information during the life cycle of the product needs to be approved as part of a variation. Yes, please.
Greetings. My name is Iskandar. I'm National Center for Medicines, Republic of Kazakhstan. Are there shortcuts in approval procedures for medicines that have the priority in being available for the public? For example, vaccines or...
So there are a number of skills and incentives that are used in the centralized procedure. One is the prime scheme, that there will be a dedicated session later on during the days. There is the accelerated assessment. So in those cases where there is an unmet medical need, we have shortened timelines that give the possibility to the applicants to have an opinion at day 90, day 120, or day 150. And we have authorized, we had a new process, and over the last 2 years we had almost 9 products going through this scheme. But there is a separate session on early access to medicine. If you can see it, Rothio's slide, number 10 slide, if I remember, it shows all the interactions. So you can see the agency is very active, unlike FDA, where a company needs to work with FDA hand in hand before they they submit the dossier. In Europe, it is voluntarily. But the agency has a lot of opportunities to come in and discuss with the agency the development through pediatrics, that's actually mandatory, but through scientific advice, discussion whether it's borderline or not, through the innovation task force. So there are a lot of fora that the applicant can use to get advice from the agency on the development plan. And if it is an unmet medical need, then there are the schemes, the prime scheme, and then or they can use accelerated assessment. Agnes?
I think there are two ways of shortening the time frame. One is shortening the development time, and one is shortening the approval time. Your question was more about, I think, the approval time. We can have an accelerated assessment. The company may request it, but the committee will have the final words, meaning they can refuse it, they can agree and change their minds, but they can also decide that because they see a need for that particular product, they will assess in a short time frame. So there is a lot of flexibility here. And the second thing, which is probably more effective, in fact, because development takes years, assessment takes about a year. So if you shorten the development time by 1 or 2 years, you're actually gaining far more time than a couple of months. It's really more effective. That's what Evdokia was mentioning, all these measures we are taking to steer the development in the direction of meeting the regulatory requirement. We are not buddy with industry. We are actually working with them to make sure that they deliver what we need in the right way.
Meher Siddiqui, U.S. Embassy, London. Is there a committee in the EMA that handles like quality assurance issues and makes sure that there's no conflict of interest in the member states' assessment agencies? And then the second question is the cost of licensing equal for all products, or it differs based on the amount of evidence that is required?
There is a dedicated team within the EMA looking at conflicts of interest. We have very strict rules and very strict policy. Each member state, each expert who is in our database need to declare their interests, and which are made publicly available. The same applies to us, EMA staff. And depending on our declared conflicts, then we may be allowed to be involved or not be involved in evaluation procedures. The same applies to committee members or any experts that we use in our advisory groups. Your second question was, sorry?
The cost of licensing.
Cost of licensing, it's transparent, it depends, it's published. What I would like to say is that for small and medium size companies, EMA has certain incentives and fee deferrals. Yep.
The price actually depends on the number of forms and presentation that you will submit. So there is a minimum price, and then if you have more, you want to have boxes of 20, boxes of 40, but you will pay more because we will have also to produce product information matching this. There are other questions here. Yeah.
Mwanga Khashoggi, U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So I have a question about the rapporteurs and the continuity of the assessment from the time that the application or the dossier comes in through post-authorization. So how are the rapporteurs selected? Is it by therapeutic area? Are you doing it in rotation? And then also, for once there's a decision to approve the product, are the same rapporteurs, for example, deciding what are the post-authorization studies, and then do they follow on to look at the results, or is it a whole different set of rapporteurs at that point?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question indeed. How the rapporteurs are selected? First, we take, once we know a product is coming, it is presented to the committee, to the relevant committee, and the different members present themselves as candidates, and then there is a voting on which one will take the appointment. So the committee appoints the two rapporteurs among the ones that have been presented. They present themselves, obviously, having into account their expertise. Once they are selected at the beginning of a human medicinal product, we appoint two members from a rapporteur and a co-rapporteur at the CHMP, and a rapporteur and a co-rapporteur at the PRAC, at the Committee for Risk Assessment. And these are going to be the same 4 rapporteurs that will take care of this product throughout its life cycle. After approval, they will be the ones establishing which are the studies that are needed. They will be the ones that will look at the results of these studies. They will look at the product information. They will be the ones, always in the same way, connected to the rest and sharing the information with the rest. But they will be the ones that have the knowledge of the product from the beginning. Yeah.
Last question. If the EC adopted the negative opinion for the new products, will the sponsor have the chance to appeal their products?
There is always the possibility to appeal, and then there is a re-examination procedure where the committee will will define the grounds of the appeal, and then there will be an assessment on those grounds. Yep. So yes, in every decision there is a possibility to appeal.
Just to punctualize, this is the only case in which the committee will choose two different rapporteurs. So the same rapporteurs that have worked at the beginning will not be the ones dealing with the re-examination. So to make it more fair, two different committee members will be chosen to look at the re-examination for if it's requested by the company.
We have been challenged on the fact that it is the same committee who is doing the appeal procedure, saying, of course, you're not going to disagree with yourself. So that's why we have set up this procedure by which we change the rapporteur. So they have to become accustomed in a reasonably short time frame, the whole dossier as primary assessors, look at what the company is submitting as grounds for appeal. Of course, the company cannot bring new data. It has to be on the same data. It would be unfair to the committee to say, oh, by the way, I have now an enormous trial that I will add and you have to change your views. But we have seen over time, which makes the committee works nicely, that the committee has changed its mind sometimes. They have seen the data, they rebalanced the evidence. Generally, when the committee is quite split in its views, which unfortunately happens, but that's science, not everybody agrees. And at the end, they manage sometimes to change the view and to go from, generally from negative to positive. Sometimes the company wants more than they have been given when we give a restricted indication, and they appeal, and it may go to wider or even sometimes smaller.
So if I can just, the last one is they can also, in the re-examination procedure, they can also consult with external experts. They can have can bring external experts that maybe can bring the key aspects on why they should consider it differently.
I'm in charge of typekeeping, so we can only take 2 extra questions, and we need to be brief in our answers. So, any questions? Any last? Yes, please.
Just one. I think it's more related to what Hassan just asked on the sunset clause. I think you mentioned that if a manufacturer does not then market within 3 years of the initial approval, then they can't market. Is it then, do they not market in all the countries, or just the countries where they had not marketed before?
It's just in one. If they make it available in the market of at least one member state, of one of the 28 ones, then the sunset clause doesn't apply.
Which you look at the objective may not be the most effective, but at the same time we have to set the bar. We can't say 3, 4, and not 5. So we said at least 1. Okay. So you've seen through this presentation of this morning that we've tried to give you more the principles than the letter of the law or the number of the articles. Sometimes we have to refer to the articles because it's a way we understand each other, but we're trying to give you more how we work in practice. So really feel free to ask the question. I think it went very well this morning. It's very interactive and I like that. So feel free to challenge us or to ask for questions so we make it real, not just theoretical. And I think I would like to thank our 4 speakers, and Okay, Ricardo wants to say something.
No, just I won't add anything to what my colleagues have said. Just I would like to point out that you have in your package a very nice document summarizing the EU system. So you might be interested in very high-level document. And if you're interested in the various procedures, the centralized, decentralized, mutual recognition, etc., referrals, there is a very good document published by the European Commission, which is supposed to be for companies, but it's also interesting for us. And it's called the Notice to Applicant. It should be easy to find it on the internet. It gives a lot of details on the various procedures. So you might be interested in it. Thank you.
Okay, so I will, Evdokia.
Thank you very much for all your questions. Thank you to our colleagues for the presentations. Thanks to Agnes for her interventions. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.